So Nick Fuentes is a famous racist and white nationalist, and I went on Rumble, the streaming platform he works on, to watch his videos and hear him out, I guess.
Hate Six Flags. Always hated Six Flags. Six Flags was very traumatizing.
The first video I saw from him was called "It's Time for Me to Ascend," and it made for an odd introduction to the guy. In the first 2 minutes, Nick whines about being chubby and small and wanting an awesome body.
I'm gonna get huge arms, I'm gonna get a huge chest, told myself I'm getting fat, I need to ascend.
And I saw that and thought, wow, he's just like me for real. Wow, I'm a weak and soft man and want to ascend just like Nick Fuentes.
Oh, you're getting fat again. Oh, the goy slop. You eat like shit. You are shit. And you should die. So then I go on a diet, and now I want to die.
I was about to close the tab out of shame, but then something interesting happened. Someone named BigGuy2254 super chatted Nick with a $25 donation and asked,
"Hey Nick, I agree with mass remigration, but for DACA kids, aren't they more American than where they're from? Some don't even speak their home language. Should they be able to stay?
Fuck you, they gotta go,
Certified
dude.
schizo."
And this simple moment short-circuited my mind and ruined me for 3 months. I want you to imagine something. You're a big fan of Nick Fuentes, somebody who wants to see him have 25 American dollars because you like him so much. And your question for Nick is, should some undocumented immigrants be allowed to stay in America? Wouldn't it be nice if the immigrants just hung around? Nick's response to this question is entirely predictable. Indeed, I would respectfully ask that BigGuy2254 send me any future $25 donations because I'm more than capable of answering on Nick's behalf. No, you don't want the DACA kids.
Well, but what about them? What about us, bro? Too bad, so sad. The world is a tough place. But they were here as kids. Okay, so what?
Nick Fuentes hates non-white immigrants. He complains about Donald Trump because he doesn't deport enough, non-white immigrants. That's like his whole thing.
Trump is constantly signaling to his predominantly white base with a implicitly white cultural politics and is always stabbing the white people in the back. It's no different than when at the convention last year they held up signs saying mass deportations. You see any mass deportations? They're not happening.
And yet, the question is asked. The money changes hands. There was a moment when BigGuy2254 thought to himself, maybe my favorite race streamer might make a reasonable exception to his racism policy. What's my point? Why do I care about this? Am I about to tell you that actually Nick Fuentes' audience, the so-called groypers, are more complicated and even-handed than you might expect? No, not at all. In fact, as we'll see, they're usually total freaks, oftentimes more freakish than Nick is himself.
First time super dating. Do you think people want to replace Hitler with Epstein? Most people can't live without some ultimate evil to put all their problems on.
Oh my gosh.
No, my point is simply that things get weirder the more closely you look at them. In the last year, many high-profile publications have written about Nick Fuentes, and for the most part, they talk about big ideas. What does Nick Fuentes say about the future of the Republican Party, about the future of young American men? Most of these articles contain a general list of Nick's most audacious beliefs, his anti-Semitism and racism, and most of them express a profound concern at his popularity. As J. Caspian King writes, we should be more worried about Nick than we already are. None of these articles are bad. I'm not trying to start beef here. I know the New Yorker watches my videos and that they must be mauling right now. But nevertheless, I do want more. We're told this guy, Nick Fuentes, is so important and influential, but what is he actually like? How does he express his beliefs? Why is he so popular? What is this world he's built for himself over on rumble.com?
So today I started a diet and it's all protein, no carbs, and I want to kill myself.
In the last few months, I've watched a lot of Nick Fuentes, maybe around 50 hours, though I haven't counted. And today, I want to talk about it. I just hope to tell you about Nick Fuentes as I've come to see him, as the sometimes unique and sometimes quite boring person that he is. And maybe, by the end, we can start to understand why BigGuy2254 booted up his favorite streamer, Nick Fuentes, and gave him money and thought, maybe this guy is interested in my nuanced immigration hot take. On December 8th, 2025, Piers Morgan had a lengthy interview with Nick Fuentes.
Nick Fuentes, welcome to Uncensored.
Hi, great to be with you.
I don't know you.
The interview is basically about going over Nick's record. Fuentes has, of course, said many tendentious and bigoted things over the course of his career, and Morgan plays clips of these moments and is like, "You said a crazy thing about women."
Women suck. Like, they're talking too much. They're not hot anymore.
So what's up with that? Are you a misogynist?
So basically, you're just a misogynist old dinosaur, aren't you? For a young guy.
Yeah.
You said a crazy thing about black people.
I'm not living around blacks. Sorry. Call me racist. Oh, very Christian of you. I don't give a fuck.
Do you really stand by that? Are you really, are you actually a racist right now?
You're basically saying, yeah, I'm a racist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
To tell you the truth, watching this conversation is like pulling teeth. Nick Fuentes is an out-and-out racist and Jew hater and misogynist, and watching Piers Morgan act baffled and indignant about this fact for 2 hours straight, it's just not appealing television.
But are you actually attracted to women?
I am attracted to women.
You're not gay.
No.
Still, I watched the whole thing, and to be honest with you, I was not impressed. I guess that's not so surprising. You probably wouldn't expect me to like Nick Fuentes very much, but even beyond my disagreements with his politics, I just found Nick grating and annoying and kind of dim. There are all these embarrassing moments that pepper the interview. Like, at one point, Nick is explaining why he advises his audience to avoid black people and says,
White people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them.
Absolutely. They would be wise.
Why?
Because it's a lose-lose proposition. If you're Irina Zarutska and you don't walk the other way, you get stabbed to death and you die. If you're somebody else and you walk on the subway and you stand near a black person or something, maybe it's fine. It's a lose-lose proposition.
What? I have a lot of empathy for starting sentences and then realizing you don't know how to finish them, but in this case, his failure really undermines the thrust and severity of his argument, right? Being near black people is a lose-lose situation because, the first lose is that what if they stab you, and the other lose is that it's fine. So that's kind of two loses, right? There's the lose of dying, and then there's the lose of just sort of getting where you want to go. Or on the race issue, he and Piers have this whole conversation about the black male murder rate, and Nick says that 5% of black men will commit murder in their lifetimes.
Remind me again, the percentage of black men who commit murder in America. What was the percentage you gave me?
It's 1 in 20. 1 in 20.
I'll put a full explanation for this on my side channel, but suffice it to say, that's an absurd statistic. But then when Piers confronts Nick on his stat, Nick says 1%, 5%, whatever.
It's 1 in 100.
No, it's 1 in 20.
No.
But whether it's 1 in 20 or 1 in 100, that's a lot of people, Piers.
Sure,
this is
a lot of white
problem.
people commit murder too.
And come on, man. 1 in 20, 1 in 100, you're getting bogged down in the details, Piers. Who cares? People are dying, Piers. People are dying in the subway. And this is probably the most horrible moment of the conversation, at one point Piers talks about a story Nick Fuentes shared about his father saying something racist.
Well, you talked about your father, Bill Fuentes, and how he wouldn't take the family, including you, to certain restaurants because he believed they were associated with African Americans. Before me and my sister were born, my family had a saying about Olive Garden that contains the N-word that we're not allowed to say.
Now, I don't really like this approach from Piers. I find it annoying to talk about bigotry in this sort of mind of a murderer way. But even so, Nick's response is just so ridiculous. He starts by talking about how it's a new low.
Well, I would say it's a new low. I've been attacked for being a racist many times, but to attack my father, to attack my parents based on anecdotes, I would say that's sort of a new low.
Hang on, it's your anecdote.
And then later on, he says multiple times that Piers is putting his dad's job in jeopardy.
The difference is you're attacking my father. He could get fired from his job. And there's a political culture in America where if you have the wrong views, you get fired from your job. And my father has a job.
How dare you talk about my father saying that he doesn't want to go to a restaurant because he associates it with black people? Why are you doing this, Piers? Don't you see that you could cost my father his job? Don't you care about my dad's fucking job, Piers? They go on and on like this. I swear to God, at least 4 minutes are spent on daddy's job because Piers Morgan brings up a story that Nick talked about publicly on the internet as a political pundit.
Let's just not talk about my father because my father isn't here. I'm here.
Okay, well,
I'll
then do you
defend
accept
my
that you
views
shouldn't
and I'll
talk?
defend
Okay,
the anecdote.
listen, that's fine.
But beyond these sorts of embarrassing moments, I also just find Nick evasive and disingenuous. Like at one point, the boys are talking about Holocaust denial. Pierce asks Nick how many people he thinks died in the Holocaust, and Nick makes a joke.
How many people do you think died in the Holocaust? How many Jewish people?
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe 7 million. What's the number? 6 million, something like that.
So you
8 million?
And he makes the same one later on.
Oh, it's at least 6 million, but
Okay.
it could be 100
well,
times
people
more
are going
than
to be
that.
okay.
Shamefully, Piers Morgan has no idea that Nick is joking, and he responds with shock and awe that this man he thought was a Holocaust denier was in truth a sweet Holocaust believer.
It's at least 6 million. What's interesting to me is that you appear to now concede that.
Oh, it hurts to watch. The thing is, though, it's convenient that Nick makes this joke because it allows him to, not answer the question. Nick Fuentes paints himself in this interview as an iconoclast. He actually says that. He says the words, "I'm an iconoclast."
I'm an iconoclast. The Holocaust is not my religion.
And he's an iconoclast because he doesn't care about the Holocaust. This bit of propaganda that, like slavery, convinced white people to doubt themselves and that is leading to white genocide.
We're tired of hearing about slavery and the Holocaust and Jim Crow. We're done hearing about that. You guys
I'm
overplayed
not
your
done
hand.
hearing about that.
Our people are being genocided in our country. 50% of the live births in the United Kingdom and in the United States are non-white.
As he says, the only thing important about the Holocaust is the way it's used politically and the fact that we're not even allowed to debate it.
In many countries, it's not even legal to talk about it. And that's really where my interest in the Holocaust begins and sort of ends, to tell you the truth.
But of course, this isn't the whole story. Nick is a Holocaust revisionist. He said on multiple occasions that he doesn't believe that Nazis used gas chambers.
People talk about, what about the gas chambers? Well, to the extent that that's real, I find that hard to believe, but to the extent that's real, there have been atrocities committed and genocides committed in all times and all places.
If people wanted to tell me 6 million died in the Holocaust, I'd say, okay, fine. If people want to say there were gas chambers, I'd say, yeah, I don't know if I buy that. Fine.
He went on the Fresh and Fit podcast in 2023 and glazed David Irving, a notorious Holocaust revisionist, for like 5 minutes straight.
As I start to dig into it, and you find that one of the preeminent World War II historians in the history of the world, his name's David Irving, he goes in and says, well, there were attributes about the Holocaust which may not be true. Like, for example, a lot of the Jews that died in these camps, they weren't death camps. He says, the people that died there, they died because there was disease spreading in the camps, but maybe these technological horrors are exaggerated. Maybe the numbers are exaggerated.
So clearly he does have some thoughts on this issue. He's not a true Holocaust agnostic. But see, that doesn't fit into our narrative today. Getting into all that would kind of undermine his point that the Holocaust doesn't matter to him. And in any case, I don't think Nick would be very good at defending his position here. And so he makes a joke and looks at the camera like he's Jim from The Office.
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe 7 million. What's the number? 6 million, something like that.
6 million people died. Jim doesn't make that face on The Office. Or like, okay, Pierce plays a clip of Fuentes saying that most black people should be in jail, and Pierce and Nick have this interaction.
What does the most part mean? What percentage of American blacks would you like to see in prison?
Whatever the percentages of the murderers. I think it's 1 in 20 black men will commit a murder in their lifetime. So maybe let's say that, 5%.
Oh, so you're talking about black people who murder people?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But you didn't say that.
That's
You
the
just
crime
said
problem.
blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. You didn't clarify that you were talking about black murderers.
Right. No, you're right. That's a good addition to that.
Nick gives this shit-eating grin, like Jim from The Office, as though Pierce's point is just that ridiculous. But to me, it feels like a cope. Nick said that most black people should be in jail, which is psychotic.
Blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part.
He didn't want to back down from this point and look weak in front of Pierce Morgan, and so he says, yeah, I mean the black people who murder people, and then laughs about it and acts all condescending as if to imply that this distinction couldn't matter less. But here's the thing. It works. All of it works. I'm literally just watching the video wrong. As of right now, this conversation has around 6 million views. Or, maybe 10 times that. That's what I have in the script. And the comments are universally on Nick's side. I literally cannot find one that isn't some groyper delighted by how Fuentes performed. I guess this is for a few reasons. For one thing, Piers Morgan is undeniably annoying, and he has been for his whole life. At one point, they talk about misogyny, and Piers starts dunking on Nick for being a virgin, and it really cringes me out.
Have you ever had sex?
No, absolutely not.
Wow, says the guy who's never got laid.
You don't like women? Well, you haven't even gotten laid. Try getting some pussy next time, Nick Fuentes. Unless, of course, you're a homosexual.
You're not gay.
No.
And Piers Morgan is just kind of like that. He can just be a bit hard to watch. But the more obvious reason Nick won, particularly from the perspective of his audience, is the very reason I found him so annoying. He acts like a disingenuous weirdo. Sure, I think it's embarrassing for Nick to talk about how all black people should be in jail and then say, well, I mean the murderer should. But what his audience sees there is someone who doesn't back down, who refuses to acknowledge his own argument changing beneath his feet. Most black people should be in jail, and he'll affirm that point even if he can't actually do the work of affirming it. Yes, I think it's dumb for Fuentes to avoid the question of his Holocaust revision, but that gesture gives him everything he wants. He confuses the boomer Piers Morgan, he avoids making an argument he's almost certainly not prepared to defend, and he signals to his audience his belief that 6 million Jews didn't die in the Holocaust, or that it doesn't matter if they did or didn't.
I'm an iconoclast. The Holocaust is not my religion.
The only person who might have some conflicting feelings about this interview is Nick Fuentes himself. In the days after his conversation with Piers, Nick streamed about the experience, and it was kind of a weird stream. Don't get me wrong, the energy in that room was excited, almost rapturous. Fans super chatted Nick just to gas him up on how well he did. Nick described the event in these momentous sounding terms. He laid the hammer down. He destroyed Piers Morgan.
I think the Piers interview was more consequential than even the Tucker interview. You made the message clear and did not back down. Your best interview yet.
That was like the end game. Me and Tucker was like Infinity War, and that was like Endgame. That was like Mortal Kombat, finish him.
But at the same time, Nick whines a fair amount, and whines in this very odd way. Like around 20 minutes into the hour and 40-minute video, Nick talks about the moment where Morgan believed him when he said his joke opinion about the Holocaust. And he complains about how Piers reacted to that information.
So I said in response, I said, well, I think it's at least 6 million. It might be 10. He thought I was serious. And, you know, a good faith person would say, really? I'm surprised. I thought you said this. Did your position change? Why? No, but he didn't say that. He said, oh, well, your followers would like to hear. Turned it into like a, now I'm going to humiliate you. Now I'm going to make you look weak.
So Nick's accusation that Piers wasn't acting in good faith in this moment doesn't make sense to me. Of course Morgan would be skeptical of Nick saying a normal thing about the Holocaust. He's said abnormal things about the Holocaust many times. And it's a good, normal question. If you believe that the consensus narrative around the Holocaust is correct, what do you think of your audience who might disagree with you? It's called a follow-up question, Nick. It's not inherently bad faith just because you feel judged by it. Later on, Nick describes other, better conversations he's had.
You know, people like Piers Morgan, they've created such a toxic environment. And maybe that's a boomer thing. Maybe that's a legacy media thing. You know, I feel like the younger generation, because it's all independent media, it's younger guys that are more curious. A guy like Bradley Martin is just curious. A guy like Jack Neal, these are just two young guys.
And again, the victim complex is just striking. Those people he had interviews with, Bradley Martin, Jack Neal, they were just conversations. Their purpose was simply to hear Nick out, have some friendly, sometimes very friendly banter with him.
You can't be bought and you can't be blackmailed in the same way that maybe someone like Trump could be, which is a reason that I think your message is considered so dangerous, is because they know they can't really get to you.
And that's fine, I guess. It's even fine to prefer those sorts of interactions. But Piers Morgan was doing something different. He actually went through Nick's record, asked him specific questions about things he said. Even if you find him annoying, Piers was doing journalism, actual confrontational journalism. But here, that's posed as everything wrong with the legacy media. But what's interesting about Nick is that he's kind of reflective about the whole thing, that he uses Morgan's supposed failures to justify and criticize his own performance.
People like Piers Morgan, they give me no incentive to moderate. They give me no incentive to act in good faith. They give me no incentive to do any of that.
There is no incentive to moderate or be good faith, he says, as though his politics are normally so moderate, as though Morgan forced him to be an asshole or took him out of context somehow.
They condition a class of people that are contemptuous. That's really what it is. It's contemptuousness. That's the only way to win with Piers Morgan. You get somebody that is irrationally self-confident. You get somebody that almost is contemptuously dishonest, because that's what it demands. That's the only type of person that can survive.
The only way to win with Pierce and with people like him is to be contemptuously dishonest. That's not a very kind thing to say about yourself, that you lied a lot. That's not the word I'd associate with a well-meaning guy. As far as his audience is concerned, Nick Fuentes' interview with Piers Morgan was the best thing that ever happened, a triumph in the face of the liberal elite. At one point in their talk, Piers Morgan inexplicably plays a clip of Daniel Finkelstein, a Jewish British journalist.
Since he says he's on Team Hitler, you might like to ask him about the fact that Hitler arrested my mum.
And Nick proceeds to make fun of him and say he doesn't give a shit.
You know, I don't even know who this person is. Why is this person talking to me? This old British guy is saying, me mom got killed by Hitler.
Because he doesn't find it funny
by...
when you say Hitler's very fucking cool.
I don't care.
In the following days, Nick's audience made a bunch of AI songs joking about the event, some of them with around 100,000 views.
Me mom died in the holly. Me mom died in the holly. Me mom died in the alley, Mr. Mustache Money Taker.
That's how funny the Groypers found all of this, how well they thought it went. And if Nick made this kind of content every single day, I have no doubt they'd love him all the more. Yet in Nick's own words, his performance was kind of shitty, manipulative, justified no doubt by Morgan's nastiness, but bad nonetheless. He even suggests that this sort of conversation is harmful to the public.
I don't think that's a public service, actually. I don't think that's best for the public interest. And it's interesting, people said that's the most entertaining. I had to make it entertaining. Because if it wasn't entertaining, it would be a shame festival.
In these moments, it's almost like Nick feels the need to apologize for himself to his adoring audience. To say, even if you like this, it isn't me. It isn't all of me anyway. And I guess that raises the question, who is Nick Fuentes really? What does he look like at his absolute best? A few months ago, Nick Fuentes went on Glenn Greenwald's show System Update. Greenwald is a bit of an odd duck in his own right, and I don't think it would add much to this video to describe him here, but suffice it to say, Glenn gives the good faith interview that Fuentes is so enamored with, the one that Morgan rudely denied him.
I hope people continue to watch your show, even if they don't agree with you. I think it's, as I said a few weeks ago, got in a lot of trouble for saying it. You don't spout off like as a sensationalist shock jock. You, I think, are extremely well read in the areas on which you focus.
Greenwald seems profoundly congratulatory throughout the conversation, both with himself, the cosmopolitan intellectual who will sit down with anyone for an honest conversation, and with Fuentes, the dissident political figure who is often misunderstood by the mainstream media. I've never sped up a clip for a video in my life, but I have to here because I need you to understand how this man talks, and he talks a lot.
You know, obviously, you know that if I have you on my show, or if anyone has you on their show, they're going to hear, you know, kind of the highlights or the lowlights, as it might be, of Nick Fuentes. Like, here's what he said about black people, and here's what he said about Jews, and here's what he said about this group and that group and this group. And because you're on the air a lot, and because some of it is kind of an ironic humor that you have with your audience, which I think most people in real life is how they speak, and part of the appeal, if you're doing well on the internet, is the fact that you are being a real person. You're not presenting one fake artificial public face with a different private character. And I think that's given people, in one way that's been very good for you, it's been part of your appeal, but another way it's given people a very easy way to demonize and attack you by taking these quotes that can sound not just very racist, but very almost like Nazi-like and a kind of an extermination rhetoric.
People throw around these clips of you espousing Hitlerite rhetoric, but that's not the true Nick. You know, it couldn't be. I know you better than that. There is one back and forth in this interview that I find fascinating. So Greenwald basically says to Nick, look, I get that you don't like immigration, but these people do assimilate. The children of immigrants are by and large just Americans, so what's the difference really between today's immigrants and those of America's past?
These people start going to college, they become doctors and lawyers. A lot of them are secular. They seem American in terms of how they speak and how they behave. Like, what to you is the difference, other than just numbers maybe, between immigrants of 100 years ago and the immigrants of now?
And Nick talks for like 2 minutes here, but he gives a very straightforward answer. The difference is race.
Well, difference is race. The immigrants of 100 years ago were racially European. And the people that are coming in now, they're Indian, they're Chinese, they're Hispanic, they're racially different. They look different. They just are different.
Around 15 minutes later, Greenwald presses Fuentes on this a little more. He says, if you're so opposed to people coming into this country because they do bad things to our culture, what about educated white women? These people you scorn so much and who tend to disagree with you about everything.
On some level, the kind of bugaboo right now of American politics are highly educated, metropolitan, liberal white women who are just kind of the bane of everybody's existence, who are the plight and plague on American politics. What about that? What does that reflect? I mean, these are white women, like hardcore white women, probably with a long history of white ancestry in the United States. And yet, for you and so many other people who think like you, these are like the embodiment of the threats to the American way of life. What's the explanation for that?
Hardcore white women, Glenn says. Balls to the wall, just white women. Again, Nick gives a lengthy answer, but he makes his point well in the first 10 seconds or so.
Well, I think in general, you're sort of conflating what is abstract versus what is real. White women have liberal ideas, but they carry white genes. And so white women have eggs that when fertilized by white men are going to create white babies.
White women are white, Glenn. I want to have a white country, not a country filled with people of other races and other racial interests.
I still think that white people should exist, even if there are a lot of liberal white people right now, because I'm white.
So when I look at this interaction, what I see is this desire from Glenn to uncover the true Nick Fuentes, the complicated Nick Fuentes. You're a reasonable guy, and so you're probably interested by how well the children of immigrants of color assimilate into our culture.
To a lot of them, they became super assimilated, super American.
And while you're watching it, you just want to yell at the screen, what are you talking about, Glenn? Of course that's not interesting to Nick. Why would it be? Glenn here is acting like bigotry to Fuentes is a kind of complicated instrument, something he uses to bring about his desired political ends. But no, that's not true. For Nick, bigotry is the desired political end. He wants to live around white people and not non-white people. And when the simplicity of that position becomes obvious, when Glenn hits that brick wall, he has nothing left to do but kind of concede the point and change the topic.
I'm part of a group that is going extinct, and I don't want to go extinct. I want to thrive.
Yeah, that's probably a universal human instinct. All right, let me shift gears a little bit and ask about Charlie Kirk.
Yes, Nick, it's very normal to be worried about white extinction, and I know that because this is a normal conversation and you are a normal guy. I'm not gonna lie to you, this was a real source of tension for me as I started to write this video. For totally selfish reasons, I wanted Nick to be this nuanced figure, someone who made tons of really novel points. I wanted Nick to be the person Glenn Greenwald thought he was talking to, and I actually considered scrapping this entire video when I found out that he wasn't. In truth, every case Nick Fuentes makes about politics is extremely simple. For the most part, he starts with a big audacious claim, one that expresses the emotional reality that bigotry is good, and then he manufactures dumb information and arguments that support that emotion. It's really not that deep. We already saw this with Piers Morgan. Nick begins with these bold claims. There's a white genocide going on. Most black people should be in prison. And all that sounds good to Nick's audience. It gives weight and purpose to their racism and comes off as transgressive and rebellious. But when he actually argues his point, what does it look like? Just the stupid, narrow-minded nonsense you'd expect to hear from a Fox News boomer. 5% of black men commit murder. Being on public transit with black people is a lose-lose situation.
If you're somebody else and you walk on the subway and you stand near a black person or something, maybe it's fine.
You should be afraid all the time. That's the thinking man's position. In a different video from around 5 months ago, Nick talks about how we live in an anarcho-authoritarian state because white people have to follow the law and pay taxes, and black people get to do whatever they want, commit crime.
Increasingly, we live in a state of both anarchy and tyranny. And if you live in a major city, you know what this feels like. Anarchy for them, tyranny for us. Anarchy for the criminals, anarchy for the brown and black people, anarchy for the migrants and the invaders, tyranny for the white people, the law-abiding people, the taxpayers.
And it doesn't make any sense, of course. Crime rates have been going down for decades in America. There is no reason to use such extreme language, act like we're in the nightmare crime zone.
If you drive through certain neighborhoods at night, you will be carjacked. Your car will be stolen out of your driveway. You will be followed home and held up at your home. You will be burglarized. It is like a state of anarchy.
But it's a story that matches the emotional power of Nick's bigotry, and that's what really counts. Later on in that video, Fuentes goes on a lengthy tangent about some white guy whose car almost got jacked 3 times and who killed the last person who tried it.
Guy in Denver, Colorado, they try to steal his car 3 times. On the 3rd time, the guy snaps. He gets in his car, he chases them, he kills one of them. They put him in jail for 54 years. Now you say that's a crazy reaction. You don't get in your car and chase somebody shooting out of the car. That's insane. But we've been pushed to this point. It didn't start that way. The first time that guy had his car almost get stolen, it didn't happen the 2nd time that guy almost got his car stolen. It happened the 3rd time.
He doesn't mention that the murdered boy, Xavier Kirk, was 14 years old, and that his friend, who was also shot in the back, was 13. He doesn't mention that Ora Schur, the killer, shot 11 times at these kids as they were running away. I don't think these facts would change Nick's stories. I don't think they would affect him or his audience one way or the other, because Nick's basic goal is to construct a society so rotten that morals no longer count, a society that necessitates evil.
Get in the car, put the seatbelt on, motherfucker, it's go time. Somebody dies, 54 years in prison. It's his fault?
And we can see the same kind of gesture throughout Nick's politics. Like, let's talk about Jews and Israel. That subject is probably the centerpiece of Fuentes' work. It's a big part of what's catapulted him to such popularity, and it's certainly what puts him most at odds with conservative establishment politics. So let's really try to understand what's going on here. To start off, there are some facts about Israel and Judaism that can make people feel a bit uncomfortable, I think. Perhaps because acknowledging them is seen as some tacit endorsement of people like Nick Fuentes. So just for the record, it is true, obviously, that Jewish people have historically liked Israel quite a lot, that Zionism as a movement was constructed for and by Jews, that Zionist lobbying organizations like AIPAC have a significant amount of political influence and are driven mostly by Jewish funding. And you can imagine a version of Nick Fuentes who mainly makes these kinds of points, right? Just a normal guy saying normal facts who everybody just hates for no reason. This certainly seems like what Glenn Greenwald was angling for.
Why do you consider Israeli influence and the influence of the Jewish lobby so much more of a problem than these other kinds of sort of distractions that people on the right are trying to sell to people to make them forget about Israel?
And it makes me wonder if Glenn watched even one moment of Nick talking before having him on his show and gassing him up. The thing is, this is just not how bigotry works. Nick Fuentes cannot be happy dealing with basic, straightforward statements about reality, about Israel, because what's at stake for him is a much more totalizing vision of international Jewry than those facts would allow. Nick Fuentes doesn't like Jewish people, and his reasons for this position are, for the most part, quite simple. In a video from 3 years ago, he talks about how Jews shouldn't be allowed to have political power in America. And there, his main reason was that they're liberal and pro-abortion, and so go against his Christian theocratic impulses.
Doesn't that matter? That Jews don't consider abortion to always be wrong? That Jews don't consider a lot of these things to always be wrong? That's changing the fundamental character of our Christian nation and of our Christian civilization. We're never going to save society if we're being ruled by judges that don't think that abortion is wrong.
A month ago, he went on the Hodge Twins podcast and spoke about how Jews hate Jesus and think Jesus Christ is boiling in excrement in hell.
They say that Jesus Christ is there in hell, boiling in excrement and semen. That's what the Talmud says.
Man, that's gotta hurt. You gotta be lying.
Look it up. Babylonian Talmud.
Really?
They hate Jesus.
And one must ask if Nick has ever met a real person who said any of that stuff. You know, when you're trying to have fun with your friends, but somebody asks what happened to Jesus. A few months ago, Nick responded to Elon Musk tweeting that Jews are white people.
And Elon Musk replies and says, Jews are white. They're actually the peak whites in the world.
And he acts really high and mighty about it too. He gives off real, like, it's not my job to educate you vibes.
And I read stuff like that and I think, so does he just not know, or is he lying? Because those are really the only options.
Jews did mass immigration to the West, and they did it as revenge.
They don't care if our country's flooded with immigrants. They don't care if Europe is flooded with immigrants. As a matter of fact, they want it. It's their punishment.
Some crazy rabbi said that France had the Notre Dame fire coming to them, and that's a very normal belief among Jews.
When the Notre Dame Cathedral burned, probably at the hands of Muslims, rabbis were rubbing their hands together and saying it was revenge for the Disputation of Paris.
When you're just trying to vibe with your buddies, but somebody asks how you feel about the Notre Dame fire. This is most of what Nick Fuentes cares about. Jewish conspiracism and antagonism toward Western Christendom is very central to his ideology. And the way he talks about global politics and Israel basically exists to affirm that emotional core. To produce Israel not as a country, but as the cautionary tale of organized Jewry. To this end, Nick will sometimes say basically true stuff. AIPAC has a lot of money. Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle and the guy who recently acquired TikTok, is close friends with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Larry Ellison is one of the richest men in the world, net worth that is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. He's given tens of millions of dollars to the IDF. And he's a personal friend of Benjamin Netanyahu.
And you can watch that and nod and think, you know, wow, this guy's cooking. Sometimes Nick will get into this very reductive view of history. The only reason the US supports Israel is because of Jewish influence, blackmail, and manipulation.
It's ours. It's our country. But it feels like it has been hijacked. It feels like it is being exploited. It's being exploited for the benefit of another country, and they use blackmail, intimidation, bribery to achieve these ends. They do it in DC, they do it in New York, they do it in the smoky corridors of power.
The only reason America got into the Iraq War was to protect Israel, and that was done at the behest of Jews.
What does Israel do for us specifically?
Specifically, I wouldn't be able to tell what Iraq does for us specifically either. No, I don't know.
So
100%. I don't know.
Okay, well, the answer is
tell
nothing.
us.
And the answer is nothing. We had no business in Iraq in 2003. We had no business in Iraq in 2011. It matters. Of course it matters. And here's why. My contention, of course, is that we were led to Iraq by Jewish Zionists.
The only time I've seen Nick fully argue that latter case was in a 3-year-old conversation with Destiny, the liberal streamer, and it's hard to find usable clips of it because so much of it is, it's literally like this.
Always
None of these things are remotely similar to each other.
If I laugh, it looks like I'm not losing. If I laugh, it looks like I don't have a completely naive world.
15 random facts that I'm going to fact check on every single thing you're talking about.
So these are arguments that only function because inconvenient evidence is discarded. It doesn't matter that the Middle East is a wealthy and strategically important region filled with countries that have at various times opposed the US or allied themselves with the USSR or Russia. You know, Egypt, Syria, Iraq. It doesn't matter that America has, for a long time now, been in the business of extending and safeguarding its sphere of influence in Korea and Vietnam and Europe and Latin America. We don't need to consider major reasons Bush and Cheney wanted the Iraq War, post 9/11 fervor, the desire to control the Persian Gulf and its oil. It doesn't matter that the faction of neoconservative Jewish people in Bush's administration who supported the war by no means represented the broad American Jewish community who overwhelmingly opposed the invasion. We never even have to ask, does America's agenda so often intersect with that of Israel because Israel is, in part, an expression of American power? No, to Nick, Jews are the final boss of politics, the end of every conversation. Jews want American military power and regime change, and they get what they want, and so anything that takes away from that point must be a distraction or a lie.
We hate that our country is being held hostage by this transnational gang.
And sometimes Nick verges into this kind of delusional sludge. In his interview with Bradley Martin, he talks about how Israel might become a stronger nation than the US because they plan and scheme so much.
So you could say Israel's a tiny fledgling country with little weapons compared to us. But who's more powerful? A very open, short-term minded country without any long-term plans, without cohesion, without a kind of national plan? Or a country that is extremely tight-knit, extremely organized, has influence in many capitals, is spread out and dispersed.
And how they might, just as a for instance, one day put explosives in American phones the way they did with Hezbollah beepers.
In 2024, Israel goes to war against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and they detonate the pagers. Now you consider that in America, many of our tech companies are deeply involved with Israel. If they can listen in on Hezbollah's pagers and then blow them up, you think they don't have an insurance policy on us? Now, it's not to say, I'm sure there's not a bomb in my iPhone right now, but would you trust them to make your iPhone?
It's a bit frightening to think about, I won't lie, but crazy things do happen. Arguments like this represent a kind of unfettered window into Nick's mind, I think. Jews here are a force so sinister that reality, even a simplified or distorted reality, cannot possibly match the story in his head. And so we must resign ourselves to the psycho future. Many Americans in the last few years have come to dislike Israel, and they do so mostly because of a moral argument, because Israel has committed and continues to commit horrible atrocities against the people of Palestine. That's obviously true for the left and also very likely true for the right. And that's because the moral argument is the one that makes sense, because it's about something that definitely exists and matters a lot, because it concerns crimes against humanity that the United States has funded and facilitated. And it's not as though Nick never makes this argument, never discusses Gaza with moral conviction.
Israel is, in no uncertain terms, committing a genocide and an ethnic cleansing in Gaza.
But for the most part, he basically hijacks that sentiment to do what he usually does. Sell his audience emotionally affirming victim slop, justified with mind demons and half-sourced information. Nick Fuentes recently had a conversation with the original founder of the Proud Boys, Gavin McInnes. So Gavin is a kind of Israel freak. He thinks Muslims are bad and that it would be good if Israel conquered the Middle East.
I saw you talking recently about how if Israel had its way, it would just take over Lebanon and Egypt and Jordan. And I'm like, good.
So Jews are the Doge of the Middle East, basically. Like, that's just the way that one might explain it. Jews would be the Doge.
I see Israel as Doge, and I see Islam as corruption and wasting money.
You might expect Nick to be hostile in this conversation. Gavin is, after all, acting as his ultimate political foil, the true apologist for Jewish cabal.
Like this fear of what if Israel gets so much power, Islam's got it. Islam's in our government right now.
There should be some fireworks. But no, Nick is friendly. He recycles his arguments about the threat Israel presents, talks about how they might put bombs in our phones, though here calls that idea cartoonish for some reason.
And so that in this world of spying, espionage, intelligence, and especially autonomous systems and drones, you wonder, do we get to a point where Israel flips a switch and the iPhones explode? Or, and that's like a cartoonish
Can't we
example.
focus on what if Saudi Arabia gets money?
But even with these enormous claims being thrown around, the tone is always patient and amiable. You would never guess that these two are ideological opponents on the issue Nick holds closest to his heart.
I don't think you hate Muslims enough. That's my problem with you. I hate Muslims.
The truth is, Nick and Gavin have more that unites them than that separates them, and I think they're aware of this fact. After all, both men design their politics around bigotry, both agree that the world is best understood as a battle of races, and both speak in deranged and grandiose terms.
And look at what these fucking sheiks do. when they get their billions. They drive cars on 2 wheels. They face fuck our women. They're barber pirates all over again. They just bring them over with money.
Nick would never bring up the ethnic cleansing of Gaza in his conversation with Gavin McInnes. Even though it would obviously be appropriate, he never argued that Israel conquering the Middle East would be wrong because conquering and killing is wrong. Because to do so would betray a kind of humanitarian impulse that has no place here. What do you mean people have rights? Who gives a shit? We are important men, and we're here to talk about racial interests and white victimhood.
What if America had all the same values, Christian and everything, but they were all Pajeets?
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't do that. Like, your hypothetical is too obtuse for me to think about it.
But that's where it's going.
Yeah.
And while one says that the true antagonist of the West is the Arabs and the other says it's the Jews, the precise shape of bigotry is ultimately less important than bigotry itself. This is Nick when he's not forced to be contemptuous and bad faith by the mainstream media. These are his beliefs on a good day when everyone is nice to him and just trying their best to learn. And it's nothing. It's a boring, empty husk. But here's the thing. Sure, you can look at Fuentes and point to the fact that he has bad, shallow politics and move on with your day, but does that really give us the full story? I don't think so. Like, a big theme of Nick Fuentes' political career right now is people taking him like really seriously. There's a broad question that hangs over American conservative politics. Is this man the future? There are tons of largely positive conversations he's had, of course with Greenwald and McInnes, but also with Tucker Carlson, Jack Neal, Dave Smith. Even in the Piers Morgan conversation, there's a sense of self-importance to the whole thing. Morgan introduces this interview as some examination of Nick Fuentes' beliefs.
I intend it to be an examination of what you said on the record, an examination of what you believe, or what you say you believe.
But what about Nick's beliefs require examination? And how does Pierce actually examine them? The guy has fairly simple beliefs and he spends multiple hours every day elaborating on them on his own. Why are we acting like it's all a big secret? Like the public record needs to be cleared up in some way. And look, it's not some great mystery why this is happening. Nick is a hot, sexy new guy. He's dangerous and dissident, and people like to watch him. And besides, some of these people are probably bigoted themselves, so it just makes sense for them to be nice to Fuentes. But still, that does leave the question open, what is Nick doing so right? What makes him in particular a magnet for this kind of attention? People must see something in Nick Fuentes, so what is it? In December of 2025, Coleman Hughes, a podcaster for the Free Press, made a video called "Nick Fuentes Knows Exactly What He's Doing."
How has Fuentes achieved this remarkable infiltration into the culture? Well, it's all been made possible by the fact that he's successfully playing a double game.
In it, he makes the case that there are essentially two Nick Fuenteses. The one who appears on Rumble and acts like a crazy person, and the one who appears on podcasts and acts relatively normal.
Why do Rumble Nick and Podcast Nick seem to be two totally different people?
And as you might predict from the title, Hughes concludes with the idea that this is all likely an intentional ploy from Fuentes.
Rumble Nick energizes his core fans by attacking minorities, attacking women, and attacking America. And then Podcast Nick runs interference with the wider media, framing his sincerely racist rants as out-of-context clips.
He captures audiences by seeming nice and then radicalizes them by being nasty. This video was influential in its own narrow way. It's important to Fuentes studies. It's referenced explicitly by Piers Morgan at the beginning of his conversation with Nick, and I think Piers actually gets a few of his talking points straight from Hughes.
You have two personas. There's one that you roll out now for podcasts and for shows like mine, where you come across as reasonable. And then there's your show on Rumble.
Unfortunately, I don't think the video is so good. For one thing, Hughes just gets stuff wrong. Like, he says there's this big contradiction between Nick saying that having babies is important and his saying that women are annoying.
If his main fear is that the next generation of Americans won't be white enough, then why does he tell his followers that modern women are too annoying to bother with? and that married men are cucks. Shouldn't he be encouraging his followers to get along with women, marry, be fruitful, and multiply? The immigrants he's so worried about will certainly be doing just that.
Weird remark there about immigrants being so fecund, but leaving that aside, it's just a silly thing to say. Yes, you can hate women and people of color at the same time, and that's all that Nick Fuentes does.
Yeah, all these people posting this like wife and husband content. It's so funny when my wife tells me to do stuff. I'm such a pussy. Ugh.
You may personally believe that those two goals are at cross purposes in some way, but that doesn't mean they're actually contradictory. And besides, Nick never actually says that white people should have more babies. His one and only solution for white extinction is mass deportations.
I'm America first. I'm a nationalist. I'm a Christian. My program is I want to end mass migration. I want mass deportations.
So this is just a CinemaSin style Nick Fuentes ding. Later on, Hughes says this.
Podcast Nick will tell you that he's celibate because, like a good Catholic, he is waiting until marriage. But Rumble Nick will make it crystal clear that his celibacy has nothing to do with religion and everything to do with the fact that he finds women to be, quote, fucking annoying.
And it's wrong on a few levels. Nick doesn't often say on podcasts that he's a virgin because of Catholicism, and when he does, he makes it clear that that's not the whole answer. On the Hodge Twins podcast, Nick does say that he's a virgin because of his Christianity, but goes on to clarify that the real reason is that he's just kind of an autistic guy.
Yeah, well, I'm Catholic, so I'm waiting for marriage, but also, you know, I'm kind of like an autistic guy. I don't want to totally, because I feel like it's kind of a cop-out to say, oh, I'm just religious. There's a lot of religious people. You know, they're doing it anyway.
On the Red Scare podcast, one that Hughes explicitly mentions, Nick says he finds women annoying and doesn't like to associate with them.
I also think that when women pay attention to you, they have a weird way of like making your world revolve around them. They just start causing problems. They just start causing drama, and it's like,
shit testing.
Yeah, so I just try to avoid women as much as possible.
So why on earth are you doing this podcast?
So maybe there's a clip I'm missing, but if Nick says this other stuff on podcasts, doesn't that deflate Coleman's argument? Also, Nick never said on Rumble that he's a virgin because he hates women. At least I haven't been able to find it. This is the clip Hughes plays to evidence his point.
Guys get to a certain age and they're like, you know what? Women suck. Like, they're talking too much. They're not hot anymore. Like, you're fat, you're chubby, you're not as hot as you think you are, you fucking talk too much, you're a bitch.
But Nick doesn't say anything there about his precious, beautiful virginity. Rather, Nick is just saying that he hates women, which, you know, is the thing he loves to say and says all the time. And given that, what is Hughes even talking about? And that gets me to the real problem with this Free Press video. It just massively overstates its case. Sure, Nick Fuentes on podcasts is different from Nick Fuentes on stream. When he's talking to people, he laughs more, he's calm, he's friendly. On his streams, he leans into a shock jock persona.
Thank you for the big super chat. You're chutting out and it's disgusting. Like, you kind of just disgust me.
But he does get at the same kind of stuff regardless of the context. Nick will proudly say on podcasts and friendly interviews that he cares about white extermination, that women shouldn't vote.
Do you think women should have fewer rights than men?
Generally speaking, yes.
That the problem with Jews is that they personally are a tribalistic and scheming people.
Because my critique goes further, and it says that it actually does have to do with Jewish identity. Jewish identity is so powerful and so potent. Jews refuse to assimilate. They're so powerful. They're so tribalistic. They're loyal to each other. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
How can we make these bold claims about Podcast Nick and Rumble Nick when those two guys seem to share an identical project? Here's the thing. It disappoints me that this Coleman Hughes video isn't good because he's onto something real. When I watch Nick, I also find myself thinking about his performance, about the way he sometimes presents himself in contradictory and strange ways. It's an interesting subject, but one that I think is a little bit more complicated than Hughes makes it out to be.
All right. Hello, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
In December of 2025, Fuentes had a lengthy conversation with Richard Spencer. I'm not sure if Spencer requires an introduction, but to those of you who haven't heard of him, Spencer was probably the most prominent white nationalist of the 2010s. He was at Charlottesville. He did a dumb little Hail Trump.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
In one of my favorite episodes of The Office, yes, that's the third time I'm bringing up The Office in this video, Dwight delivers a speech that's secretly inspired by Mussolini.
Have you ever asked yourselves in an hour of meditation, which everyone finds during the day, how long we have been striving for greatness? Not only the years we've been at war, the war of work.
And Spencer always kind of reminded me of that.
We were meant to overcome all of it, because that is natural and normal for us.
In truth, I don't think Richard was ever a character who people took all that seriously. He never had the kind of celebrity that Nick Fuentes now enjoys, and I think that's basically because he seems like a pseudo-intellectual nerd.
The mainstream media, or perhaps we should refer to them in the original German, Lügenpresse.
Probably the most famous thing about him is that he got punched in the face one time.
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
I haven't tracked the evolution of Spencer's politics. I only have a vague idea of what's gone on with him in the last decade, and I don't really care to know more. But suffice it to say, he's gotten just a little bit weird. He's become a weird little guy, though maybe not in the way you'd expect. Richard spends basically the entire conversation griping about the modern right and its excesses. He speaks about how conservatives have gone crazy, especially when compared to liberals.
What I see there is basically institutional liberalism and centrism. And then the right wing, which is schizoid nonsense.
He talks about how Trump is a conspiracy theorist and how conservatives can't govern.
In order to truly reflect and represent the base, you have conspiracy theorists in office. And they're almost, investigating themselves on some psychic level. It can actually never govern anything.
He even suggests that the idea of America first is stupid because we're a nation of immigrants and always have been.
We had other people come here over the course of the 19th century where it's like, you're welcome. Go for it. And American nationalism is perhaps a contradiction in terms. The notion of we're just going to put America first, or as Matt Walsh said, America only. This actually is in contradiction to our traditions. The liberals are right about many things.
And how does Nick Fuentes react to all this? Well, he loves it. I mean, he's delighted. He explains that he kind of likes diversity too, likes living in a multicultural city.
I live in a diverse city. And I prefer it. I'd rather live in a diverse city than live in like the trad Catholic commune in Coeur d'Alene, or the trad Catholic city in Kansas, or the whites only town where
I think you would be a little bored at Back to the Land.
He says that racism is basically unpersuasive, that lots of people these days are perfectly happy not caring about the white race, and that there's no good way to convince them otherwise.
Even the racialism seems very low energy. We hear from these people like immigration, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you have to convince people to care about it, I mean, what do you do when you confront a Gen Alpha, a Gen Z guy, and you say, you need to marry a white person and have white kids, and they go, I don't care about my race. Like, I don't care about that. Like, what do you tell them? Yeah. Well, here's why. Because of, what happened 500 years ago, they're going to say, yeah, like I have an apartment with my Hispanic girlfriend and we go to work and we watch Disney Plus and we're happy as a clam. It's like, okay, well, checkmate.
So look, there is no way to square this Fuentes conversation with other things he said. There is no coherent politics to draw out of this. Someone who describes America as an anarcho-tyranny where black people are allowed to commit crimes cannot say that diverse American cities are great. Someone whose entire brand revolves around America first can't nod and smile and provide zero pushback when presented with the idea that the whole America first thing is stupid.
There's a contradiction in the American nationalism itself. Anyway, some big thoughts. What do you think about that? Am I wrong that we need tariffs and everyone's going to be happy and all that stuff? Or what do you think?
No, I totally agree with you. And I feel the same way.
He sells the mug. He sells the America First hat and mug. Why won't he defend it? Perhaps you want to look at this interview and conclude that Nick Fuentes is nobody, not even a real racist. He's just an ambitious guy who's willing to say whatever sounds right in the moment, and who was fundamentally unwilling or unable to stand up for any of his supposed beliefs. And look, maybe there is some truth in that, but only a half-truth, and one that somehow gives Fuentes both too much and too little credit. After all, he is, for the most part, very consistent. There is no clip of Nick Fuentes advocating for the goodness of Jewry in America, or for the equality of women, or the importance of diversity to the American project. Yes, he humors one of those positions here, but we shouldn't miss the forest for the trees, allow one moment to totally alter our vision of someone's beliefs. Rather, I think we should look at this conversation with Spencer as an exercise in rhetoric, and one that's pretty important to Fuentes' career. So a big part of Nick Fuentes' recent appeal, one that's obvious if you consistently watch his content, is that he can sometimes feel like a pretty moderate figure. And I don't mean that in a political sense, but in a personal one. He's capable of seeming like the normal person in the room. Nick often gets super chats, and most of them, as you might expect, are clearly from deranged internet weirdos. And a lot of what Nick does is yell at these people and tell them to chill out. At one point, some guy asks him how we can support the America First movement on LinkedIn, and Nick gets so mad.
What's the best way to show support publicly? 20K followers on LinkedIn with America First without being canceled.
Please do not dox yourself on LinkedIn. You can't. You do not show support on LinkedIn.
Or at another point, a Groyper mom asks for Holocaust revisionist literature for her 10-year-old son.
Any book recs that aren't propaganda for a 10-year-old boy interested in World War II?
No, I have no book recommendations for a 10-year-old. I don't even know what a 10-year-old would read. That can't be real. What red-pilled World War II books that deny the Holocaust do you know of for a 10-year-old? For what, a 5th grader? Whatever? What Holocaust revisionist literature do I have for a 5th grader? I don't have anything for you. I'm sorry.
That clip, Nick Fuentes explaining to his fan that he doesn't have any good Holocaust denial for 10-year-old Rex off the dome, it's really good. Like, you have to give it to him.
Any book recommendations that aren't Jew propaganda about the Holocaust from my 10-year-old?
Nick plays into this kind of moderate persona a lot, and I think it's a great help to his political project. Like, Nick often talks about how he's not actually a hateful racist, how his beliefs don't come from looking down on black people, and how real racists need to be shunned.
I feel like people have kind of gone full circle, and now 10 years later, people are like, they actually hate non-white people and go, yeah, I'm racist, so what? And I don't know, I feel like maybe that's a mistake in a sense. This whole like autistic racial, like actual racialism, actual racial militant hatred, it is like a freak show. Because that comes from an emotional place.
And you can see how this kind of position anchors him as the serious alternative, right? Nonsense claims about black crime rates and white genocide sound more rational when juxtaposed with a racist caricature who justifies their hatred with nothing but a love for hate. We are not like him. We're a movement of principled and thoughtful people.
White people should go out of their way to avoid black people when they see them.
Absolutely. They would be wise.
We can see this same sort of gesture in the way that Nick talks about the Super Bowl halftime show. So in a video made very recently, Nick defends Bad Bunny's performance at the Super Bowl. In his view, it wasn't just a good show, entertaining and fun, but also basically inoffensive.
It was good. It was fun. It was lively. Let's be perfectly honest. It wasn't a militantly woke show. It just wasn't.
He even gets mad at a super chatter for disagreeing with him and says that while he still believes in white genocide and wants a white country, he thinks the whole movement has gotten kind of lame.
The halftime show was in Spanish and all the performers were brown people. The message was, this is what America looks like, a mosaic of Latin peoples. Clearly it was political. Clearly it was a middle finger to white people. Weird take. Are you even a white nationalist at this point?
Honestly, I don't feel like one anymore. I feel like, do I want America to be a white country? Yes. I'm pro-white, but the movement has just been captured by losers and idiots.
So what Nick says here doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if we agree with him that Latino immigration is a big problem and that these people don't assimilate and that they're destroying white culture, surely it just makes sense to hate Bad Bunny's show. He mostly sings in Spanish and he said "ice out" at the Grammys.
I'm gonna say "ice out."
The white nationalist case against it seems solid to me, all the more solid because the show appears fun and apolitical. You know, it literally normalizes diversity and Latin American immigration. But of course, Nick has an extremely negative reaction to things he finds cringy. And in the case of the Super Bowl halftime show, I think he's clearly responding to the fact that Turning Point USA, the conservative outfit started by Charlie Kirk, made their own alternative halftime show, and that it sucked ass.
I just wanna catch my fish, drive my truck, drink my beer.
Their show was, as Nick correctly observes, low energy and grievance fueled, and so potentially harmful to the conservative cause. So if that stuff's bad, if there are cringe people advocating against the Bad Bunny show, then that show must have been good and inoffensive, and all the people mad about it must be stupid losers.
I just wanna cut my grass, feed my dogs, wear my boots, not turn the TV on, sit and watch the evening news.
Nick doesn't change his beliefs. He says he's still advancing a white supremacist position, but his enemy is nonetheless to the right. These people who are on the wrong side of some aesthetic war, and so must be essentially wrong-headed in some way. And nowhere is this pseudo-moderate tendency from Nick more clear than with his discussions of his most recent political rival, Candace Owens. For those who don't know, Candace Owens is a conspiracy theory aficionado. She believes that Brigitte Macron is secretly a man.
I would stake my entire professional career on the fact that Brigitte Macron, the current First Lady of France, was born a man.
And that Emmanuel Macron might be plotting her death. Recently, she got way into the idea that Charlie Kirk's death was related to Israel in some way.
About 48 hours before Charlie Kirk died, Charlie informed people at Turning Point, as well as Jewish donors and a rabbi, that he had no choice but to abandon the pro-Israel cause outright, okay? Charlie was done. And then did he, just 48 hours later, conveniently catch a bullet to the throat.
It's hard to overstate just how often Nick makes fun of Candace for these beliefs. For the last month, he's talked about her constantly, the way she gathers knowledge, her whack job approach to the world.
If you're on the Candace Owens train, I'm not even going to pretend like I'm going to try to appease you. It's wrong. It's stupid. All of it is stupid, and I'm not going to entertain it at all. Candace Owens says, oh, they're trying to kill me. We haven't seen a shred of evidence. Like, where's the evidence? She just sounds crazy. Then she goes right into, well, I know Tyler Robinson is innocent because Charlie Kirk visited me in a dream and told me so. Come on now. I mean, and some people are saying, well, hey, dreams can be prophetic. Yeah, they can be, but they're fucking not evidence, you know?
So I find Nick's whole emphasis on logic and rationality kind of interesting because it just feels so artificial. Fuentes is, after all, a conspiracy theorist, someone who has a tenuous connection to reality and a loose grasp on evidence. 3 years ago, Nick said that he thinks the COVID vaccines are poison in some way, and that he would refuse to accept any proof to the contrary.
So what would it take to convince you that like the mRNA vaccines were good?
Well, you're not going to convince me of that, but here's the thing. I just have a general distrust of
everything?
Medication.
He said that he doesn't know if dinosaurs existed.
I already know Nick doesn't think dinosaurs are real, right?
Well, I don't know. I'm not an archaeologist. But I don't know. I don't know if I believe that 100%.
More recently, he said he believed in astrology and numerology, said that these things are witchcraft and should be taken more seriously.
But the astrology thing, to me, people are not taking it seriously enough because first of all, astrology is real. Going by another word, you can call this witchcraft, paganism.
Do you think numerology is real as well?
I do.
Really?
I do.
He said he believed that Israel controlled the Epstein files and was using them to blackmail Trump, and that that's probably why Trump bombed Iranian nuclear facilities like 9 months ago.
So it's bookended from when the Epstein files are brought up as a threat against Trump to when they're buried by the DOJ, with the war in Iran. And given that Epstein was potentially Israeli intelligence, I think all signs point to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem controlling those files.
I'm not sure if he still thinks that, despite the wellspring of new Epstein content, by the way. I watched his recent stuff on the subject, and he doesn't bring it up. Around 3 years ago, Destiny, who I know has an oddly prominent role in this video, was talking to Nick, and 9/11 trutherism came up. Nick and his friend Sneeko wanted Destiny to watch a lengthy film arguing against the consensus 9/11 narrative.
You seen the new Pearl Harbor, the 9/11 documentary?
No.
Oh, you gotta watch that.
And they made fun of him for wanting to do research and not just watch the movie.
Put it on stream right now. It's on YouTube.
No, because
why won't you watch it?
Because
Destiny?
one,
You have some time right now.
Watch it.
You're gonna call Hillary and Bill up before you watch a movie?
Destiny, why don't you just watch it with an open mind?
I actually call Hunter
with
Biden.
An open mind and be open to the possibility that the things in it are true.
Sometime later, Destiny watched that film and wanted to argue about it.
I'm gonna be honest, I'm a big believer of the official story now. Before I was like, damn, I don't know, but now now after looking at everything, I'm like, damn, the official story holds up pretty well.
Nick, though, was totally unprepared. He hadn't seen the film recently, and I frankly doubt that he'd have some sterling 9/11 truther argument in the best of times.
Why wouldn't we just scramble F-16s?
I don't know. I don't remember. I haven't seen this one in a million
Oh
years.
yeah? Do you remember any of the arguments we have?
I remember the NORAD, that it was like there was a drill or something or whatever that day. You just watched 5 hours of 9/11
Yeah, because you told me to. Because
I was on the beach this weekend. Okay.
It was on my.
But what's incredible about this conversation is how Nick justifies his total lack of knowledge on the subject. Around 10 minutes in, he says this.
I think there's something about our assumptions about the world, which is why, and the foundation is, I think things are not as they seem. And you are willing to say, oh, they basically are as they seem.
It's the anthem of every conspiracy theorist, and expressed with a clarity I don't normally expect from that set. It's good to advocate belief in conspiracies, belief in 9/11 trutherism, not because I have sufficient evidence to believe that case, but because, shady stuff happens sometimes. Reality is not what it seems, therefore, it's whatever I personally want it to be. Nick doubles down on this line around 20 minutes later when he says this.
Now, my job as somebody that does my show is to challenge the government. My job is to challenge the national security apparatus. And the reason why I think I don't have as much responsibility as maybe you think I do, and people get on my case even from my side. They're like, you hate women too much, or, you say too much racist things or whatever. And it's like, the way I see it, there is so much moving against those trends that if I'm being extra, if I have a superfluous amount of skepticism, or I push a conspiracy, it's not, totally sourced or whatever, it's like, well, you could turn on the television, any channel, any day of the week, and get the government line, and get the thing that you're pushing.
It doesn't matter if what I say is true. It doesn't matter if I have integrity, because you already have the consensus media arguing the opposite side. So, looking at this, I can't help but think, where does he get off judging darling Candace Owens? So what Candace believes with zero evidence that Israel killed Charlie Kirk or whatever. I'm sorry, are things as they seem? I don't remember getting the memo that things are as they seem. So what she thinks Emmanuel Macron is trying to murder her? There's a whole establishment media apparatus in place, and all it ever does is peddle the narrative that Emmanuel Macron isn't trying to kill Candace Owens. What responsibility does she really have, one could ask, to not be a freak? In the end, Nick's repulsion for characters like Candace is obviously more about branding than anything else, a way of detaching himself from aspects of his own far-right movement that he personally finds embarrassing, even though he has no meaningful disagreement with her or the way she approaches reality. Nick wants to announce himself as a reasonable political thinker, and folks like Candace just make the project of hardcore white guy stuff look bad. And personally, I see Nick's conversation with Spencer as the height of this persona. If I sat down with Nick Fuentes and said, boy howdy, I sure do love living in diverse cities. Just think about all the yummy food you can eat, and it's fun to be friends with all different kinds of people in a big melting pot. Hot take, I actually don't think Nick would totally agree with me. I think he would say I was trying to kill all white people because I hate them and think Jesus Christ is rotting and poopy. But Nick isn't talking to me. He's talking to Richard Spencer, an out-and-out ethno-nationalist, and this provides a much-needed opportunity to be a bit reflective perspective about his political project. He's not some vapid ideologue, right? He doesn't have an emotional attachment to any of this, and so he's willing to state the obvious.
At the end of the day, we have to grapple with the fact people like the way things are. People are going to complain and bitch, and they'll talk about, I want to be a part of something bigger. People kind of actually like the way things are a lot, and you could see it in their behavior.
Maybe diversity is kind of good. Maybe living in a big multiracial society is better than the alternative. Maybe racism is broadly seen as a loser ideology, and maybe that's for good reason. And yes, Nick does contradict himself here, undermine his profound belief in the goodness of bigotry. But in a way, this contradiction legitimizes him, makes him out to be a deep and practical thinker about the project of hate. I want to be clear here, I don't think that any of this could really be called a grift, that Nick is just pandering to his audience. That's Coleman Hughes' take, and I don't think it adds up. After all, the opinions Nick shares on his stream are often pretty unpopular among his fans. Do you think the Groypers liked it when Nick said that diverse cities were nice? Of course they didn't. I had to stop watching after Nick said he likes living in a diverse community. What the fuck? This is brutally revealing. Both are useless cucks. Bro, prefer diversity? Might as well just retire and stop being pro-white. The whole point of being against the Jewish agenda is that it's anti-white. If you're not fighting for your people, then what are we doing here? The comments are all like this. I basically can't find a positive one. Does it make sense to look at that and assume that Nick is lying to get people to like him? I don't know. I guess my instinct is to say probably not. If anything, I think Nick is profoundly true to what he believes, but that this truth it's at tension with itself. Nick lives two lives, both of which are equally important to him and his audience. Like, of course, he wants to be the bigotry goblin. His entire worldview is built on saying over and over that white men are being victimized by every other group of people, that they are literally out to get you.
They're not part of it. They're not part of European civilization. They're not part of Christian civilization. They need to be kept out of the corridors of power.
That they are literally out to get you. But this is a stupid guy thing to say, and we've seen what it looks like in practice. Lying and being weaselly with Piers Morgan, giving vapid or delusional answers to Glenn Greenwald or Gavin McInnes. The problem isn't just that it's an ideology built to appeal to the freaks of this world, but also that it can't be argued well, that it's at odds with basic reality. And so Nick must, at times, embrace this other form, become a guy who cares very much about evidence, who hates all the reactionary culture war bullshit, who can't stand nonsense conspiracies, who would rather live in a diverse city. And the point of it is, this is the only way Nick gets to look smart, the only break he gets from the banal humdrum of life as a professional bigot. In truth, I think this is the essential character of Nick and the heart of his appeal. He is intellectual and convicted and in some ways open-minded, and the greatest proof of that is that he sometimes refuses to defend the insane things he believes. This is the Nick Fuentes who goes on Piers Morgan and acts like a freak, only to stream afterward and reflect about how much of a freak he was. This is the Nick Fuentes who consistently champions a shallow and single-minded racism, only for hordes of podcasters to invite him on their show in search of hidden depth. This is the Nick Fuentes who argues day in and day out for mass deportations, only for big guy 2254 to pay him $25 to ask him how he feels about letting the immigrants stay.
Well, but what about them? What about us, bro? Too bad, so sad. The world is a tough place.
So that was supposed to be the end of this video. I was gonna say that, and then we were gonna have our Nick Fuentes beatdown. And that was going to be it. But then Donald Trump launched a war against Iran. And it's such an important event and frankly such an interesting moment in Nick Fuentes' career that I felt like I had to talk about it. I think it really exemplifies the way Nick Fuentes approaches politics. So the relationship between Donald Trump and Nick Fuentes goes back a decade, but it's also pretty easy to explain. Nick, per his description, began his political career electrified by Trump.
He was like the savior of Western civilization. We looked at him as like, and by we, I mean me and all the online kids, teenagers that supported him, we really believed the hype.
But now, in dreary 2026, he hates the guy and spits on him every chance he gets. As I touched on earlier in the video, that's in large part because Trump hasn't deported enough immigrants, never built the wall, etc.
Instead of giving money for a border wall and fixing immigration, they did a corporate tax cut. They did the same thing.
But there's also a deeper fury at play there. In a recent video, Nick talks about wanting some far-right party to take over the United States and run it as a dictatorship.
And I want some kind of political outfit to be created that will eventually take over this country and then run it like a dictatorship and fix it.
And he talks about how Trump refused his many opportunities to enact that dictatorship.
Over and over it's happened. How many wasted opportunities? The COVID pandemic, the BLM riots, the stolen election, this. And has he ever used that as his Reichstag fire? Has he ever used it to actually expand or institutionalize his political power? No!
So when you look at a clip like that, Nick's animus for Trump makes a lot of sense. He saw that Trump was a strongman authoritarian and hoped he could destroy America and install the new tyrannical order of 4chan dweebs. And when that didn't happen, or didn't happen enough, Nick took his toys and went home. All this to say, it's not surprising at all that Nick Fuentes is very angry at Trump over his war on Iran. The war is blatantly in line with Israeli interests and is therefore just more evidence that the transgressive and dangerous Trump is actually just another, establishment shell. Still, the way Nick talks about the subject is really fascinating. Nick starts off his video on the subject by talking about how Israel forced the hand of the US.
This is the Jews' world, and we're living in it. This is Israel's world, and we're living in it.
The last president who went against Israel was JFK, and he was assassinated for it.
And so people have said, well, the reason President Trump couldn't refuse is because he knows they would kill him. That's what Tucker Carlson said today. He said, you can't say no to Israel because the last president that did is JFK.
So this sort of rhetoric, it basically makes apology for Trump, right? Trump is just another American politician bending the knee to Israel, and there's really nothing here we can blame him for. Nick does say that even though Israel would probably kill him if he went against them, Trump still should have because that's what America first means.
So I'm sorry, that's not an excuse. When they say, well, they'll kill Trump, they'll kill his family, Vance knows they'll kill him, they'll kill his family, well, that's what you signed up for. Let him do it. Let him do it. Go to the American people and say, this is happening.
But that's kind of a high standard, right? And one that still places the brunt of the responsibility on Israel. Trump is not a real actor. He is mostly just a vessel through which the plot can work. Now, who knows? Maybe it's true that Trump has done nothing special here, that Kamala Harris and Biden and Obama would have waged this same war. It's not impossible that that could have happened. Still, I'd argue that the information we have makes that a very hard pill to swallow. After all, Biden didn't go to war with Iran. If Israel can force our hand now, why didn't they under a beautiful Joe? And Obama was responsible for the Iranian nuclear deal, the one that Trump threw away in his first stint as president. The possibility of Iranian weapons of mass destruction is the pretend reason Trump waged this war, so it at least seems relevant that Trump clearly laid that groundwork.
We will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. It's a very simple message.
Leaving that aside, Trump just loves conflict, right? Loves using his powers in strange ways to enforce some grandiose vision of American power. He launched a stupid trade war and has bombed more countries than any other president, and he saber-rattled with Greenland and kidnapped the leader of Venezuela. Nick was explicitly in support of those latter two things, by the way. He likes it when America does insane bullshit.
We need a truly great leader. And what is a great leader other than a leader that takes territory? Other than a leader that gets victories. You know how you're winning? You have more territory than you started out with.
But aren't these actions basically consistent with Trump's choice to go to war with Iran? Finally, Trump's government is filled with insane Jesus freaks and war hawks who are obsessed with protecting Israel. Mike Huckabee, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio. That's not true for every president, is it? My point is, we can't know what would have happened under a Kamala Harris presidency, but it nonetheless seems really stupid to suggest that America is at war right now because Israel threatened the life of Donald Trump.
Go to the American people and say, this is happening. And if I die, you know who's responsible.
To understand what's happening in American politics right now, we must at some point be able to state the obvious. Regardless of what other factors are at play here, Trump and the people who like Trump and surround Trump just like doing this kind of stuff. But here's the thing, I think Nick knows that, at least on some level. Later on in this very video, he talks about how he's gonna vote for Democrats now.
If Rubio or Vance are on the ticket in any form in 28, I'm voting for a Democrat.
And that's because the GOP sucks, but also because as much as he hates Democrats, Biden didn't take us to war in Iran.
Maybe if a Democrat were in office, we wouldn't go to war with Iran. Joe Biden kept us out of a war with Iran. We didn't have a war with Iran under Joe Biden. And some people say, well, you would have gotten it anyway. Okay, so then voting doesn't matter. Is that what you're telling me?
Maybe it would have happened either way, but the facts are the facts, right? Trump did this, Biden didn't, and to some extent, that matters. He gets at a similar idea earlier in the video when he talks about JD Vance for like 10 minutes, judges him for an interview where he said that Biden was too weak on Iran.
JD Vance sat with Sean Hannity and he said, we have to hit Iran hard. We have to punch them hard. You can't do these small strikes like Biden is doing. You have to punch them in the face.
A lot of people recognize that we need to do something with Iran, but not these weak little bombing runs. If you're going to punch the Iranians, you punch them hard, and that's what he did when he took out Soleimani.
So we see in this video the problems that naturally emerge from conspiratorial thinking. Conspiracy theories are good when you want your audience to believe a big idea. America doesn't have sovereignty. Israel is totally in control of us.
And of course, we all know that Israel is the boss. Israel controls our country. Now you know it for a fact.
But the issue with conspiracy is that it is hyper-deterministic. There's a shadowy cabal in the highest echelons of society, and that cabal has most of the power. And that claim leaves precious little room for other explanations for reality, little ability for us to discuss political events as they appear to us. If things are not as they seem, why talk about the way things seem? If President Trump would be shot and killed if he broke with Israel, why talk about the politics of his vice president? There's an unresolved tension here between Nick's desire to engage in conspiracy and his desire to engage with political reality. And I think that may have been at the back of Nick's mind as he sat down the next day for a lengthy conversation with Alex Jones.
So, Nick, you told us what was coming 2 years ago. You've been proven right. You know, you're like the new Alex Jones being right on things.
Right at the beginning of that interview, Fuentes says this.
As you know, in 2024, I said that Trump is the Iran war candidate. It was inevitable that Trump would take us to war. And as a matter of fact, I think that's a large reason why he got elected in the first place. I think that if you look at the election in 2020, it was obviously stolen and rigged. And so you say, well, how did he then come back and win in 2024? Well, clearly the riggers had to stand down and let him take office. They let him win. And I think they let him win because they knew that unlike Joe Biden and unlike the Democrats, he was going to have no hesitation, no reluctance whatsoever to engage Iran and its proxies.
Yeah, we have a new theory, and a baffling one. The powers that be, the ones who stole the election from Trump in 2020, were told to let him become president in 2024 because the Jewish cabal thought he would happily go to war with Iran. So Nick's case here just doesn't really follow from the other things he said. The day before, he claims that the Jewish cabal kills any president who deigns to go against them.
A US president can't say no to Israel because they control our system and they have penetrated our country so thoroughly they will literally kill you.
And if that's true, and if that's an effective method for controlling US policy on Israel, why do they need to steal the elections? The whole theory just feels like weird overkill to me, and that's especially striking because it is just totally unmoored from reality. Has Israel threatened to murder every American president? No, of course not, but at least you can imagine such a thing. You can conjure an image of the Illuminati visiting upon Trump and telling him the deep state's master plans. But now, what's even going on? Israel is able to coordinate every American election. They're in command of the election fraud apparatus? Literally how? What do they do exactly? But even though Nick's claim here is over the top, and even though it seems to depart from his prior claim, I think it's a really effective line because it resolves the tension I was just talking about between conspiracy and reality. Suddenly, Nick has a theory that allows him to express all the beliefs he wants to express. It makes sense that he's worried about Jews, a group of people who run society, and it also, crucially, makes sense to worry about Trump specifically, about his staff and his choices, about the things he does that other presidents probably wouldn't have done. If Israel just shoots every president who steps out of line, we don't really have much to talk about. But if they like Trump, if they chose him, then we can engage once again in the world of actual politics. So I think this sequence of events really speaks to how fundamentally pragmatic Nick Fuentes is, how even his most outlandish claims are ultimately rooted in his very particular rhetorical needs. Conspiracy theorists are often understood as basically weird people. The phrase evokes the idea of some sad QAnon grandpa who is so unwilling to deal with a chaotic and arbitrary world that he turns his mind over to hallucinations and grand plots. But that's not what's going on here, right? Rather, conspiracies to Nick Fuentes are basically just flourish, a way for new knowledge to be codified, made to feel big and important. And because of that, the theory can be revised and contradicted on a dime. At first, it made sense to say that Israel controls America by shooting at its presidents, but then that theory became limiting and unhelpful, and so it was replaced, perhaps intentionally, perhaps without any thought at all, with this new idea, the Israeli election fraud hypothesis. The plot here is an incidental feature of the information being communicated. It is a pure reflection of Nick's ego. And really, is that such a surprise? Is it so strange that someone like Nick Fuentes exists and is successful and seems so agnostic to reality? I mean, maybe it's kind of cheesy to say, but just look at Trump. He's basically a bigger, more important Nick Fuentes. Yes, the two men don't share the same politics exactly. Yes, Nick dislikes Trump these days, but they have both embraced grandiose madness as a political tool. We could talk about a million things here, from the election of 2020 to the birther movement, but let's stay on topic and talk about Iran. Trump has given no coherent explanation for why America is fighting this war, and much like Fuentes, Trump's theory of the case seems to be in a constant state of flux. He says we're fighting to get rid of non-existent nuclear weapons, but then consistently reframes the war as one of annihilation. Iran had plans of taking over the entire Middle East and completely obliterating Israel. Just like Iran itself, those plans are now dead. If they block the Strait of Hormuz, the US will, quote, make it virtually impossible for Iran to ever be built back as a nation again. Trump has said a few times that he would only accept unconditional surrender from Iran, but his press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, clarified that unconditional surrender will be attained when Trump, quote, determines that Iran no longer poses a threat to the United States of America and the mission's goals have been fully realized. It's a kind of recursive nightmare statement, and it makes clear that the purpose of this war only really exists in Trump's mind, that words like surrender and victory are essentially meaningless concepts, totally unmoored from any objective outcome. Trump produced the political rot that Nick Fuentes makes use of, benefits from, and at times it seems like Nick agrees with that. In the stream he did after talking to Piers Morgan, when he discussed how he had to be a contemptuous liar, he directly compared himself to Trump.
And people say Trump is a bullshitter and Trump is a sociopath or whatever. It's like, but Trump is what we get when the media does nothing but lie. When the media acts in bad faith and they're merciless and they just try to cut you no matter what, you get somebody that is irrationally self-confident. You get somebody that almost is contemptuously dishonest.
This is how Trump won, after all, by being more horrible and disingenuous than the supposedly evil journalists who deigned to ask him questions. This is the main lesson to take from his presidency. I touched on this earlier in the video, but a large part of Nick Fuentes' fame comes down to his dissidence and rebelliousness. Bradley Martin and Jack Neal gave their Nick Fuentes episodes nearly identical titles: The Most Cancelled Man in America or On the Internet. Glenn Greenwald waxes philosophical about how Nick is often taken out of context. Even Coleman Hughes begins his podcast with a lengthy explanation about how the attempt to suppress Nick has contributed to his celebrity.
It seems to me that the ham-fisted attempt to erase him from public life only drew more attention to his ideas in the long run.
And look, there is a there. Nick Fuentes is dissident, he is an extremist, he is a bigot. That's most of why he was canceled. That's what these interviewers are salivating over.
Giving people a very easy way to demonize and attack you by taking these quotes that can sound not just very racist, but very almost like Nazi-like.
I don't want to play down who Nick Fuentes is or what he represents. But at some point, you're watching Nick Fuentes and you've seen him for hours and hours, way more than the 50 you said you watched when you started writing this video, and the shock value wears away and you're left thinking, we've seen this before. This person isn't unique. When I look at him now, all I can see is this self-aware, nihilistic, grandiose embodiment of Trump-era propaganda. In Nick's interview with Tucker Carlson, Tucker speaks with shock and awe at the fact that Nick was placed on a no-fly list.
By no-fly list, you mean not extra scrutiny, but like not allowed to fly in airplanes in the United States?
Not allowed to fly, yes.
How old were you?
I was 23.
Did you have any felony convictions?
No.
Okay. I wasn't even aware that could happen.
This event is the ultimate evidence of Nick's canceled status, our proof that society is out to get him. They don't talk about how Nick got on that list. Perhaps that would take away some of the romance of the story. But the truth, as Nick tells it, is that he was placed on that list because he went to the January 6th insurrection and egged on the rioters. Trump put him up to it.
74 million Americans voted for Donald Trump on November 3rd. 85% of Republicans believe that this election was stolen. And every single conservative in this country knows that the legitimacy of this democratic system is over. It means nothing anymore.
Anyway, yeah, it's time for the Nick Fuentes beatdown. Shadow, the hedgehog, I need your help. Looks like we have a bigot who needs taking care of. I have to admit, this bigot is pretty fast. I think I might need a little more help on my side. Goku, come in. Hey Shadow, hey Big Joel, so there's a bigot that needs taking care of, huh? That's right, Goku, we need your help. I have to admit, this guy is pretty strong. Well, with dirtbags like this, there's only one thing to do. Kame, Hame, Ha! It totally buffed out. This guy's stronger than he looks. I knew you weren't strong enough. Like you did any better, Shadow. Touche. Guys, if we don't stop fighting, then this bigoted poster is gonna get away with it. We have to do something. And just what is it that you suppose we should do? Yeah, this war seems impossible. I think we have to call in the big guns. I think we have to call in Shrek. What are you doing in my swamp? Shrek, we wouldn't normally come to your swamp, but we really need your help taking out this bigoted guy. And how am I supposed to do anything? All I have is this stupid donkey. Shrek, what are you talking about? Why don't you just use your super Shrek Smash? Yeah, a Shrek Smash could do. Yeah, a Shrek Smash could really iron out this bigot. I guess I could lay one down on him. Donkey. Yes, Shrek? Donkey, I fear he was too strong for me. Shrek. Donkey, get out of here. Shrek wouldn't want you to see this. Shrek wouldn't want you to see him die. He was a worthy ally of the cause. Wait a second here. So Shrek's dead. Goku buffed out. Shadow was too weak. I certainly couldn't beat on him myself, so what are we going to do? Is Shrek actually still alive? Donkey, come back! This bigot isn't going to live on my watch. Donkey, just watch this. Well, that looks like it did it. It looks like Nick Fuentes just fucking died. One less bigot to pollute online discourse. One less bigot in this sick world of ours. Yeah, you said it, Shadow. Let's go home. And can we eat some rice? Yeah. Yeah, sure, Goku.